They said I was too old to fight back. Left me standing in the rain like a ghost, but the deed was still in my name. So I waited in silence while their lies collapsed. She lost it in the driveway. Before we begin, please subscribe, and I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? I thought surviving heart surgery would bring me closer to my family. Instead, it became the reason they erased me. The morning light leaked through the hospital blinds like weak tea, casting pale stripes across the linoleum floor. Machines beeped their steady rhythm, while the sharp smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils. I sat on the edge of the bed in my hospital gown, feeling my bones sharper than before, my hair thinner. The scar under my shirt was still tender, a reminder of the triple bypass that should have been my second chance. "Excited to go home, Mr. Blake?" Nurse Monica handed me the discharge forms with that practiced smile they all wore. I nodded and lied through my teeth. "Sure am." 3 weeks. 3 weeks of recovery. 3 weeks of waiting for calls that never came. I kept thinking about Travis, Sierra, and especially little Lily. In my mind, I'd pictured them decorating the house with a "Welcome Home, Grandpa" banner, maybe balloons tied to the mailbox. Instead, I got one voicemail from Travis a week ago. "We'll pick you up if we can." They never did. The cab driver was a retired firefighter with stories for days. "Bet your grandkid will tackle you when you walk in," he joked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. I forced a smile and watched Boise glide past the window. Rain hit the glass like static, each drop blurring the familiar streets. I clutched my coat tighter, fingers shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. Dread. My mind wandered back to signing the deed to the Bright Oak house 3 years ago. Travis had looked me straight in the eye and said, "We'll pay you back, Dad. Promise." When he lost his job in 2017, I covered 8 months of bills without complaint. When Sierra started her consulting business in 2019, I funded it without asking for returns. Lily's speech therapy, her private preschool, all of it came from my accounts. I never complained because I was family. That was the role I promised Ellen on her deathbed. Bright Oak Lane stretched before us like a postcard. Tree-lined cul-de-sac, tidy lawns, soft golden lights glowing in other homes. But Travis's house sat dark. No porch light. No car in the driveway. Something was wrong. I walked to the front door, fumbling for the house key with trembling fingers. Slid it into the lock and turned. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. Panic started to rise in my chest like floodwater. I tried the side door, locked solid. The backsliding glass door, cold, dead latch. Rain soaked through my coat as I circled to the garage, my heart stinging not from surgery, but from something worse. That's when I saw it. A battered brown suitcase sitting by the trash bins. I recognized it instantly. Mine. A yellow sticky note clung to it, half-soaked and barely held down by a stone. The words cut deeper than any surgeon's blade. "We're just 3 now. Find somewhere else. Your son." I read it again, and again. My knees hit the wet gravel. Eyes blurry from rain or tears, I couldn't tell which. Inside the suitcase, flannel shirts, toiletries, and an old photo of Ellen, me, and 2-year-old Travis at the lake. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. Called Travis, voicemail. Called Sierra, voicemail. Sent a message. "Travis, it's Dad. I'm outside. I don't understand. Please call me." I waited on that curb like a beggar outside a stranger's house, remembering the time I carried Travis into this very home when he broke his leg at 9. Now my son wouldn't even open the door. The cold was seeping into my bones, and I knew staying longer was dangerous for my health. No medications. No shelter. I called Riverside Lodge, a roadside motel I'd used once after Ellen's funeral. The taxi arrived, and I climbed in without looking back, the soaking suitcase heavy on my lap. As we drove away, I stared out the window and whispered to the rain-streaked glass, "You left me, Ellen. And now they did too. They didn't just change the locks. They erased me from their lives. But they forgot one thing. I still held the deed. They slammed the door. But the house is still in my name. Riverside Lodge looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Dim lighting, peeling wallpaper, and a neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The desk clerk handed me a key to room 204 without looking up from his newspaper. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step heavier than the last. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. I stood in front of the cracked mirror and slowly unbuttoned my shirt. The surgical scar ran down my chest like a road map of survival. "This isn't how this ends," I whispered to my reflection. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app with trembling fingers. There it was, the mortgage payment of $2,400, auto-deducted just 3 days ago. I was still paying for the home I'd been kicked out of like yesterday's garbage. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so damn painful. Digging into my suitcase, I found the blue folder I'd packed out of habit. Inside, deed copy, loan agreement, bank statements. Every single document had one name on it. Raymond Blake. Not Travis, not Sierra. Me. A new clarity washed over me like cold water. They thought I was weak, broken, disposable. But I was still holding all the strings. I debated calling Travis one more time, then remembered that sticky note. We're just 3 now. I closed the folder with a snap. My stomach was growling, so I walked to the all-night diner across the parking lot. The place was nearly empty at 11 p.m., just me and a few truckers nursing coffee. I ordered black coffee and tried to clear my head. But the waitress kept staring like she recognized me from somewhere. "Raymond? Raymond Blake?" The voice came from behind me. I turned to see Linda Peterson, my old neighbor from Maple Street before I moved in with Travis. She'd been a school administrator for 30 years before retiring, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp tongue. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I explained the situation. Not everything, just enough. Her expression darkened with each detail. "You're still the mortgage holder?" she asked. I nodded. Her voice hardened like steel. "Then make them bleed." Back at the motel, I spread the documents across the faded bedspread while Linda fired up her old laptop. The glow from the screen cast shadows on the wall as we worked. "Here's what we're gonna do," Linda said, cracking her knuckles like she was preparing for war. "Step 1. Stop those mortgage payments immediately. Step 2. Let the house fall into delinquency. Step 3. Gather proof of Sierra's hidden income." She pulled up Sierra's Instagram account, scrolling through posts of expensive spa days, designer handbags, and captions like, "Living my best life." The woman who claimed to have no income was flaunting purchases that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Look at this," Linda pointed to a recent post showing Sierra at some upscale restaurant. She's bragging about landing high-end clients while telling Travis she's broke. "We can use this." I hesitated. I don't want to hurt Lily. Linda's expression softened for just a moment. "Then protect her the only way you can. Cut the poison off now before it spreads to her, too." The next morning, we drove to First Ridge Bank. I sat across from a banker who looked young enough to be my grandson, but his suit was expensive and his manner professional. "I need to stop the auto payments on my mortgage account," I said, sliding the paperwork across his mahogany desk. "May I ask why, Mr. Blake?" "Your payment history is spotless." "Personal reasons." I met his eyes steadily. "I also want documentation of my full payment history for the past 3 years. He typed on his computer, frowning slightly. "This will put the account into delinquency status within 30 days. "I understand." Linda waited in the car, and when I climbed back in, she was smirking. "How'd it feel?" "Like taking back control." And it did. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. That afternoon, Linda worked her magic with the community connections she'd built over 3 decades in education. She called a friend who worked at the local real estate blog, another who handled HOA communications, and a third who knew someone at the tax assessor's office. "Information is power," she explained, jotting down phone numbers. "And Sierra's been sloppy about hiding her tracks." We drove past the Bright Oak house just as the mail carrier was delivering the day's letters. I wondered if Travis would open the foreclosure notice that would arrive in 2 weeks, or if Sierra would intercept it first. Either way, they'd know soon enough that the gravy train had derailed. That evening, I sat on the motel bed and wrote a letter to Lily in my careful handwriting. "My dear granddaughter, I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they love most. If Grandpa disappears for a while, please know it's not because I don't love you. One day, when you're older, you'll understand why I had to make some very hard choices. I sealed the letter and put it in the motel drawer along with the trust fund paperwork I'd been carrying since Ellen died. Lily would be protected, no matter what happened to the rest of us. Linda knocked on my door around 9 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and a stack of printed papers. "You're gonna love this," she said, spreading the documents on the small table. "Remember how I used to run the school district's IT department before I retired? Well, they never changed my password for the community print server." She showed me invoices Sierra had printed and forgotten to delete, consultation fees, brand partnership payments, speaking engagement deposits. The numbers were staggering. "She's hidden over $180,000 of income from both the IRS and Travis," Linda said, circling the totals with a red pen. "This isn't just lying to family. This is tax fraud." I stared at the papers, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Did I raise Travis to be this blind to what was happening in his own house? "You raised him to trust people," Linda replied. Sierra taught him that trust could be weaponized. We worked until midnight, organizing evidence, making copies, and planning our next moves. The foreclosure process would take 60 to 90 days, giving us plenty of time to let Sierra's house of cards collapse one level at a time. As Linda packed up to leave, she paused at the door. "You sure about this path? Once we start pulling these threads, there's no going back." I looked at the photo of Ellen on the nightstand, then at Lily's drawing of a sunflower I'd taped to the mirror. They took everything, but forgot one thing. I never stopped being their creditor, and now the clock's ticking. They thought I was old and broken. But I'd been planning this longer than they knew. 2 weeks after I cut the mortgage payment, a mail-forward notice arrived at the motel. The bank had sent a delinquency alert to the Bright Oak house. I held the thin envelope up to the window, watching the morning light filter through the paper. First crack in the wall. I'd been spending my mornings in the motel lobby, reading foreclosure policy guidelines while sipping coffee from a machine that had seen better decades. The other residents, mostly truckers and construction workers, nodded politely, but kept their distance. They could sense I was fighting a different kind of war. Linda arrived around 10 with a manila folder thick as a phone book. "You're going to want to see this," she said, settling into the worn vinyl chair across from me. She spread out printed screenshots of Sierra's social media activity from the past month. Instagram posts of spa days with captions like "Self-Care Sunday" and "Thanks to my amazing clients for making this possible." Facebook check-ins at expensive restaurants and boutique shopping trips. The woman who'd convinced Travis she had no steady income was living like a lottery winner. "Look at this one," Linda pointed to a photo from just 3 days ago. Sierra posed with champagne flutes at some upscale wine bar. Togar, the caption reading, "Celebrating another brand partnership. Dreams do come true. #blessed, #entrepreneur life." The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. She was celebrating while I sat in a roadside motel, recovering from surgery they couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. There's more. Linda pulled out another stack of papers. Remember that community print server I mentioned? Well, Sierra's been careless about her digital footprint. She showed me unshredded invoices Sierra had printed and forgotten to delete from the server queue. Consultation fees from 3 different marketing firms, brand partnership payments, speaking engagement deposits. The numbers made my head spin. She's hidden over $180,000 of income from both the IRS and Travis over the past 2 years, Linda said, her voice sharp with disgust. This isn't just family betrayal. This is criminal. I stared at the evidence, feeling a familiar ache in my chest, not from the surgery, but from the memory of teaching Travis how to read contracts when he was 12. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Did I raise him to be this blind? You raised him to trust, Linda replied. She taught him that trust was a weakness to exploit. That afternoon, I drove to my lawyer's office downtown. Paul Mahoney had handled Ellen's will and our estate planning for 15 years. He was one of those old-school attorneys who still kept physical files and called clients by their first names. Raymond, he said, standing up from behind his mahogany desk. I heard about your surgery. How are you feeling? Like I've been betrayed by my own blood, I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. I need to set up a trust fund. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the paperwork to establish an irrevocable trust in Lily's name. I transferred most of my remaining liquid assets, nearly $400,000, into the trust, leaving myself just enough to survive the next few months. You sure about this? Paul asked, reviewing the documents one final time. Once this is signed, you can't touch this money, even in an emergency. I'm protecting the only innocent person in this whole mess, I replied. She deserves a future that isn't built on lies. Paul leaned back in his chair, studying me with concerned eyes. Ray, I have to ask, is this revenge or justice? What's the difference? Revenge destroys everything, including the person seeking it. Justice protects the innocent and holds the guilty accountable. I thought about Lily's drawing of the sunflower, still taped to the motel mirror. Then it's justice. For her. Meanwhile, the trap was tightening around Travis and Sierra in ways they couldn't yet see. Linda had been busy with her network of contacts throughout Boise's tight-knit professional community. She'd sent an anonymous letter to the HOA revealing the mortgage default, and whispers were already spreading through the neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down had started parking closer to their driveway, trying to catch glimpses of moving trucks or foreclosure signs. Linda also tipped off a friend at the local real estate blog who specialized in exposing housing fraud. The article was already drafted. Influencer couple faces home loss despite luxurious lifestyle. It would go live the moment the foreclosure became public record. The bank had called Travis twice in the past week. I knew because Linda's contact at the phone company had confirmed the calls to the house number. Travis tried to make a partial payment of $800, barely enough to cover late fees. The bank denied it, explaining that delinquent accounts required full payment plus penalties. From my parked rental car across from the house, I watched Travis and Sierra argue in their driveway. Their voices carried on the evening air, sharp with desperation and blame. "You said he wouldn't do this!" Sierra's voice was shrill, echoing off the garage door. "You told me he wouldn't fight back," Travis shot back, his hands gesturing wildly. "You said old people just accept whatever happens to them." I rolled down the window slightly, listening to my son discuss me like I was already dead. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, accusations flying back and forth about whose fault it was, whose plan had failed, whose lies had caught up to them. Sierra stomped into the house, slamming the front door so hard the porch light flickered. Travis stood alone in the driveway for a long moment, looking smaller than I remembered. For just an instant, I felt a flicker of the old paternal instinct to comfort him. Then I remembered the sticky note, the locked doors, the rain soaking through my coat while I begged for shelter. I whispered to myself, "Still think I'm disposable?" That night, back at the motel, Linda and I reviewed our timeline. The foreclosure process would move into the next phase within 30 days. Sierra's clients were starting to ask questions about the anonymous tips they'd received. Travis's boss had quietly begun reviewing his expense reports after someone, Linda, though she'd never admit it, submitted an anonymous tip about possible misuse of company resources for personal loans. "The dominoes are falling," Linda said, packing up her laptop. "But they still don't know the full scope of what's coming." I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. No missed calls, no text messages, no acknowledgement that I existed. But then, just as Linda was reaching for the door handle, the phone buzzed with an incoming call. Travis's name lit up the display. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I pressed the red button to decline the call. "Why didn't you answer?" Linda asked. "Because I'm not ready to hear his excuses yet." I set the phone on the nightstand, face down. Let him sweat a little longer. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. Travis calling back. I let that one go to voicemail, too. The message was 3 minutes long. I played it on speaker so Linda could hear. "Dad, please, we need to talk. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. Sierra says you're trying to destroy us, but I don't believe that. You're not that kind of person. Please call me back. We can work this out. We're family." Linda snorted. "Now he remembers your family." I deleted the message without responding. They want to talk now that the consequences are real, but they had 3 weeks while I was in the hospital to remember I was family. My phone lit up again, this time with a text message from Sierra. "We know what you're doing. This is harassment. We have lawyers, too." I showed the message to Linda, who burst out laughing. "Lawyers," she said, wiping her eyes. "With what money? She can't even afford to pay the mortgage she's been living in for free." I typed back a single word. "Good." Then I turned off the phone. I hadn't spoken to Travis since that rain-soaked night when I found the suitcase by the trash. But now my phone was lighting up with his name, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, I was the one in control of whether the conversation happened. And I let it ring. Revenge isn't a single strike. It's a slow, precise collapse. Linda and I sat in our usual corner booth at Murphy's Cafe. The morning sun streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. She spread public records across the sticky table like a general planning a battlefield strategy. "I've tracked down Sierra's 3 biggest clients," she said, sliding screenshots across the table. "All tagged in her posts, all easy to contact through their business websites." The plan was surgical in its simplicity. We wouldn't go to the government first. That would take months. Instead, we'd let Sierra's clients know they were potentially associated with someone under tax investigation. Companies hate bad publicity more than they hate losing money. "Step 1, Linda explained. Pulling out a manila envelope. We send anonymous legal memos with screenshots, invoice mismatches, and tax discrepancies to each client. Step 2, I added, catching on to her strategy. We tip off that investigative YouTuber who's been exposing influencer fraud. What's his name? Marcus something. Marcus Turner. 2 million subscribers. He loves this kind of story." Linda was already typing on her phone. "We'll use a burner account to message him. Once he picks it up, it goes viral." While Linda handled the digital warfare, I made some calls of my own. My contact at Travis's company, a guy named Bill from HR who'd helped me plan Travis's surprise birthday party 2 years ago, had some interesting information. "Ray, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Bill said over the phone, his voice low. but someone submitted an anonymous tip about Travis commingling personal loans and work finances. We've had to reduce his hours while we investigate." "Anonymous tip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Came through our ethics hotline last week. Very detailed. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were talking about." I thanked Bill and hung up. Linda's handiwork, no doubt. She was proving to be more ruthless than I'd expected, and I found myself grateful for her particular brand of justice. That evening, I drove past the bright oak house. Through the living room window, I could see Travis and Sierra in what looked like another heated argument. Travis was pacing, his hands running through his hair in that way he'd done since childhood when he was stressed. Sierra sat on the couch with her laptop, probably trying to do damage control with her clients. I parked 3 houses down and watched. Their body language told the story of a marriage under siege. Travis pointed at something on Sierra's screen, his face red with anger. Sierra slammed the laptop shut and stood up, her finger jabbing at his chest as she shouted something I couldn't hear. Their neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, was watering her flowers, but obviously eavesdropping. When Sierra's voice got loud enough to carry outside, Mrs. Henderson actually moved closer to the fence. Small-town drama was better than cable television. The next morning brought the first real casualty. Linda arrived at the cafe with a Cheshire Cat grin and a printed email. "Sierra's biggest client just suspended her campaign," she announced, sliding the paper across the table. "Effective immediately, pending review of her business practices." The email was from Luxe Beauty Brands, terminating their 6-figure partnership with Sierra over concerns about regulatory compliance and public perception issues. 1 down, 2 to go. But the real blow came that afternoon. Linda's friend at the real estate blog had published the article, "The Bright Oak Fall, Local Designer's Perfect Life Collapses." The piece was devastating in its thoroughness, complete with side-by-side comparisons of Sierra's luxury lifestyle posts and the foreclosure documents that were now public record. The comment section exploded within hours. Neighbors who'd watched Sierra's Instagram stories of expensive vacations while gossiping about her unemployment finally had permission to speak publicly. Old classmates shared screenshots of Sierra's most tone-deaf posts. Even some of her former clients chimed in with stories of delayed payments and broken contracts. "This is brutal," I said, scrolling through the comments on Linda's laptop. "Look at this one. I wondered how she afforded that Mercedes while claiming to be broke. Turns out Daddy was footing the bill." "Daddy," Linda snorted, "as if you were some sugar daddy, instead of a father who got played by his own son." My phone buzzed with a text from Travis. "Dad, please, we need to talk." I showed Linda the message. She shrugged. "Make them sweat. They haven't broken yet." But privately, I was starting to feel the weight of what we'd set in motion. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Park and sat on a bench where Ellen and I used to bring Travis when he was little. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8, was playing on the swings while her grandmother pushed her higher and higher. "More, Grandma! More!" the girl squealed with delight. I thought about Lily, Emma they called her now, and wondered if she was asking where Grandpa had gone. The guilt hit like a physical blow. Was I punishing her too? I pulled out my wallet and found the drawing she'd made for me, a sunflower with "I love you, Grandpa" written in crayon across the bottom. My hands shook as I held it. That evening, I made a photocopy of the drawing and drove to Emma's school. The night janitor let me leave an envelope with her teacher, along with a note. "Her grandfather will always be near, even when he can't be seen." 2 days later, Linda arrived at the cafe with troubling news. "Sierra pulled Emma out of the school," she said quietly, cited financial strain as the reason. The guilt crashed over me like a wave. I did that. I made Emma lose her school. No, Linda said firmly. Sierra's lies made Emma lose her school. You gave that little girl a future through the trust fund. Sierra and Travis gave her chaos. She was right, but it didn't make the guilt any easier to bear. Meanwhile, the dominoes continued to fall. Travis's boss had found out about the real estate blog article and quietly frozen his promotion. Sierra's influencer agency dropped her, claiming brand misalignment. Her remaining clients started asking pointed questions about her tax compliance. The foreclosure entered stage 2 that week, public posting at the courthouse. I sat in the gallery, anonymous among the lawyers and real estate investors, watching as my former home was officially marked for default sale in 60 days if the debt wasn't resolved. Travis and Sierra received the legal notification that same day. I knew because I drove past the house just as they were storming out of it, shouting at each other in the driveway. Sierra threw what looked like a wine glass at the front yard, the red liquid staining the grass like blood. Several neighbors had come out to watch. A couple of them were recording with their phones. By evening, videos of Sierra's meltdown were circulating on neighborhood Facebook groups and next-door threads. The social unraveling had begun in earnest. Sierra tried to do damage control with a long Instagram post about jealous haters and family betrayal. But the comments section turned into a feeding frenzy. People who'd been quietly resentful of her perfect life finally had permission to speak their minds. One comment particularly stuck with me. Funny how she's suddenly the victim when her free ride ends. Some of us have been paying our own bills this whole time. Travis's situation at work deteriorated further when his boss discovered that Travis had been using company resources to research refinancing options and bankruptcy lawyers. Not illegal, but against company policy. His hours were cut again. Linda and I met at the courthouse coffee shop to review our progress. She spread out a timeline on the small table, marking each victory with a red pen. Sierra's down to one remaining client, and they're probably gone by next week, she said. Travis is hanging on to his job by a thread. The foreclosure sign goes up tomorrow. And Emma, Linda's expression softened. Protected. The trust fund means she'll have college paid for and a nest egg when she turns 18, no matter what happens to her parents. That night, my phone rang again. Travis, of course. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. Dad, I know you can hear this. The foreclosure sign went up today. People are driving by the house just to stare. Emma asked why strangers keep taking pictures of our front yard. I didn't know what to tell her. His voice cracked on Emma's name, and for a moment I felt the old paternal instinct stirring. I messed up, okay? We both did. But she doesn't deserve this. Please, just call me back. Let's figure out how to protect her. I deleted the message, but this time it took me longer to press the button. The foreclosure sign went up on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m. I know because I was parked across the street, watching the bank representative hammer the metal post into the front lawn. The sign was professional, clinical. Notice of default. Property scheduled for public auction. By noon, there were cars driving slowly past the house. Neighbors walking dogs they didn't usually walk. Real estate investors taking photos. The spectacle of other people's misery, packaged as community concern. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The consequences were rolling forward under their own momentum now, and they'd know exactly who had pulled the pin. They thought they could corner me with guilt. I brought them a mirror instead. Linda and I sat in our usual corner booth at Murphy's Cafe, reviewing the final steps in the foreclosure process. The legal documents were spread across the table like battle plans, and Linda was highlighting key dates with a yellow marker. 60 days from the posting date, she said, circling a calendar square. After that, it goes to public auction unless they come up with the full balance plus penalties. How much are we talking about? $87,000. That's what they'd need to stop this train. I nearly choked on my coffee. 87,000? Principal balance, missed payments, late fees, legal costs, and auction preparation fees, Linda explained. The number grows every day they wait. My phone buzzed against the table. Text message from Travis. We're coming there. Don't leave. I showed Linda the message. She raised an eyebrow. Think they finally figured out where you've been hiding? Small town. Word travels. I set the phone face down and ordered another black coffee. Let them come. Linda started packing up the documents, but I stopped her. Leave them out. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with. 20 minutes later, Travis and Sierra burst through the cafe door like storm clouds. Sierra's makeup was smeared, her designer purse clutched against her chest like armor. Travis looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hollow eyes, stubble, wrinkled clothes. Several other customers looked up as they spotted me and made a beeline for our table. Sierra slammed a paper down so hard our coffee cups jumped. "You're destroying our lives," Travis shouted, loud enough that the entire cafe went quiet. I looked up calmly from stirring my coffee. "You destroyed mine the moment you left me in the rain with a suitcase and a note." "That's different." Sierra's voice was shrill, desperate. "We needed space to figure things out." "Space?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You needed space from the man who'd been paying your bills for 3 years. Travis sat down heavily across from me, his hands shaking. "Dad, please, this has gone too far." "Has it?" I reached across the table and picked up the foreclosure notice Sierra had slammed down. "You think this is too far? Let me tell you what too far looks like." I gestured to Linda, who calmly opened her laptop and turned the screen toward them. Sierra's Instagram account filled the display. Post after post of expensive meals, spa days, shopping trips, all time-stamped during the weeks I was in the hospital. "While I was recovering from heart surgery," I said, scrolling through the images, "you were celebrating brand deals and posting about your blessed life." Sierra's face went pale. That's taken out of context." "Really?" Linda reached into her folder and pulled out the printed invoices. "Because these client payments tell a different story. $180,000 in hidden income over 2 years. Want to explain that context?" Travis grabbed the papers, his eyes scanning the numbers with growing horror. "Sierra, what the hell is this?" "I can explain." Sierra started, but Travis cut her off. "You told me you weren't making any money. You said we needed Dad's help because you couldn't find steady work." "I was building the business," Sierra shot back. "I had to reinvest everything." "Into spa days and designer handbags." Travis's voice cracked with betrayal. The cafe had gone completely silent. Every customer was watching our family drama unfold like a live soap opera. Someone in the corner was definitely recording with their phone. Linda leaned forward, her voice deadly calm. "Would you like to know what else we found?" She pulled out another document, an official-looking letter with government letterhead. "A whistleblower complaint has been filed with the IRS regarding Sierra's undeclared business income. If proven, she could face civil penalties, asset seizure, and criminal charges for tax evasion." Travis stared at the letter, like it was written in a foreign language. "Criminal charges?" "It gets worse," I said, taking the letter from Linda. "The investigation extends to anyone who knowingly benefited from unreported income. That includes you, Travis." Sierra stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "This is harassment." "We have lawyers, too." "With what money?" Linda asked sweetly. "Your hidden accounts are about to be frozen pending the investigation." Travis buried his face in his hands. "You said he wouldn't fight back. You said old people just accept whatever happens to them." "You were supposed to handle this," Sierra snapped at him, not caring that half the cafe was recording her meltdown. "You said family guilt would work." A woman at the counter muttered. Good for him, while shaking her head at Sierra's outburst. Travis looked up at me with desperate eyes. Dad, I know we messed up, but Emma doesn't deserve this. She's just a kid. For the first time since they'd arrived, my voice softened slightly. Emma's future is more secure now than it's ever been under your roof. What do you mean? Linda and I exchanged glances. She nodded. I've established an irrevocable trust in Emma's name, I said. $400,000 for her education and future. She'll be protected no matter what happens to either of you. Travis's mouth fell open. 400. Dad, that's everything you had left. It's everything she deserves, and unlike you two, she'll never have to lie or steal to access it. Sierra was scrolling frantically through her phone, probably looking at her frozen business accounts. This isn't over, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You're right, I replied, standing up from the booth. It's not. Linda handed Travis one final document. Notice of acceleration, she explained. The full mortgage balance is now due immediately, $87,000 to be exact. Travis stared at the paper with blank eyes. We don't have $87,000. Then I suggest you start packing, I said. The entire cafe watched as I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Sierra and Travis arguing again, their voices carrying over the breakfast crowd. You said he was weak. Sierra's voice was getting higher, more desperate. You said we could manipulate him, Travis shot back. You're the one who insisted we change the locks. I paused at the door and looked back one last time. Travis was holding his head in his hands while Sierra frantically typed on her phone, probably trying to contact lawyers she couldn't afford. Mom would have never let this happen, Travis called out desperately. My hand froze on the door handle. I turned around, and for the first time since this began, my voice carried the full weight of my pain. Ellen would be ashamed of what you've become. Both of you. The words hit Travis like a physical blow. His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the little boy I used to carry into that house when he broke his leg. But it was too late for childhood memories to save him now. I walked out into the parking lot, leaving the papers scattered across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Linda followed, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. That went better than expected, she said. Did it? I unlocked my rental car, hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. You saw Travis's face when he realized how much Sierra had hidden from him. That marriage won't survive the month. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen. It was from my lawyer, Paul Mahoney. The final foreclosure notice has been posted. It's over. I showed Linda the message. She smiled grimly. 60 days, she said. Think they'll try to fight it? I looked back at the cafe, where I could still see Travis and Sierra through the window, their argument visible to anyone who cared to watch. With what army? I said, getting into the car. They just declared war on each other. As we drove away, I realized something had shifted inside me. For the first time since finding that suitcase in the rain, I wasn't the one being hunted. They were. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with silence, signatures, and watching from across the street. I sat inside my rental car on the opposite side of Bright Oak Lane, engine off, windows cracked just enough to hear the sounds of defeat. It was late spring now, 2 months since that confrontation at Murphy's Cafe. Sunlight glinted off the foreclosure sign that had become as permanent as the mailbox, staked into the front lawn like a gravestone marking the death of their lies. The once pristine house looked tired, peeling paint around the window frames, flower beds choked with weeds, toys scattered across the porch and forgotten. A half-loaded moving truck sat in the driveway like a beached whale, its belly open and waiting to swallow the remnants of their life. Travis and Sierra were arguing in the driveway, their voices carrying on the spring air. Even from across the street, I could read their body language, defeated, desperate, angry. Sierra threw a box into the truck so hard, something inside it rattled and broke. Travis threw his hands up and walked away, leaving her to load boxes alone. My mind wandered back to Ellen's funeral 5 years ago. She'd gripped my hand from that hospital bed and whispered, "Take care of him, Ray. He's not strong like you." The irony was heavy enough to crush a man. I'd taken care of him all right. Taken care of him right out of my life. My phone buzzed. Text from Linda. Bank confirmed. Property officially reclaimed. They have 72 hours to vacate. I'd been carrying one of Emma's drawings in my wallet since the hospital. The sunflower with "I love you, Grandpa" written in purple crayon across the bottom. The paper was creased and faded now, soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. Like me, it had survived, but barely. Through the windshield, I caught a glimpse of Emma standing by the front door, holding a cardboard box that looked too heavy for her small arms. Our eyes met for just a moment across the street. She was too far away for me to see her expression clearly, but something in the way she stood, still watching, reminded me of myself at her age, observing, learning, understanding more than the adults thought she did. Sierra appeared and ushered Emma back inside, probably afraid the neighbors might see more of their private collapse than they already had. The next morning, Linda and I sat in Paul Mahoney's office for what would be our final legal meeting. The mahogany desk was covered with documents requiring signatures, transfer of mortgage rights back to the bank, confirmation of Emma's trust fund protection, and one final manila folder that Linda slid across the polished surface. "Sierra's civil investigation results," she said with grim satisfaction. Paul opened the folder and whistled low. "Tax discrepancies confirmed. The IRS is seeking $112,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest, plus criminal referral for willful tax evasion." "What does that mean for them?" I asked. "Best case scenario? They negotiate a payment plan that'll keep them broke for the next decade. Worst case? Sierra does 18 months in federal prison." Linda leaned back in her chair. "Think they'll be able to afford their lawyer much longer?" "With what?" Paul closed the folder. "According to these asset statements, they'll be lucky if they can keep their car." That afternoon, I drove past the bright oak house one last time, not to confront anyone or make a statement, just to witness the end. The moving truck was gone, replaced by a smaller U-Haul that looked like it had seen better decades. Travis was loading furniture with the defeated movements of a man who'd run out of fight. Sierra sat on the front steps with her phone pressed to her ear, probably begging someone for money or a place to stay. Her designer handbags had been replaced with grocery store shopping bags stuffed with whatever they could salvage. A neighbor walked past my car and nodded through the window. "Glad someone finally stood up to them," she said. "Rest of us have been working 2 jobs just to pay our own mortgages." Emma appeared at the living room window again, pressing her small palm against the glass. This time, I rolled down my window and waved. She waved back, tentative but genuine, before Sierra pulled her away from the window. That evening, I stood in the kitchen of my new rental home, a small but comfortable place on the quiet side of Boise. It was the kind of house Ellen and I had started in 40 years ago, before success and family obligations had complicated everything. Simple, clean, peaceful. Linda arrived at 6 sharp, carrying a bottle of wine and a homemade apple pie that smelled like forgiveness. "To peace," she said, raising her glass. "To taking back your life," I replied. We toasted in the kitchen, while the last light of day filtered through curtains I'd hung myself. For the first time in months, the silence felt comfortable instead of lonely. A letter sat on the counter. Official school district letterhead. Emma's enrollment had been accepted at Riverside Elementary under the trust fund I'd established. Full tuition, supplies, and after-school care covered through high school graduation. She'd never have to worry about being pulled out of school again because her parents couldn't afford the fees. Do they know yet? Linda asked, nodding toward the letter. They'll find out when the social worker contacts them for enrollment paperwork, I said. Let them discover that Emma's future is secure, even if theirs isn't. 3 weeks later, I was walking through Riverside Park when I saw them. Travis, Sierra, and Emma sitting at a picnic table near the playground. They were in what looked like a counseling session with a woman in a business suit, probably a social worker or family mediator. I stayed far enough away that they couldn't see me, hidden behind a cluster of oak trees. Emma was drawing on a piece of paper while the adults talked. Even from a distance, I could see the familiar movements of her small hand holding a crayon. The social worker handed Travis an envelope. He opened it, read the contents, and his face went through a series of emotions: confusion, surprise, and finally something that might have been relief. He showed the paper to Sierra, who read it twice before saying something that made Travis nod vigorously. Emma looked up from her drawing and said something to the social worker, who smiled and patted her shoulder. Then Emma held up her artwork, a crayon sunflower, just like the one I carried in my wallet. "Who's that for?" I could hear the social worker ask. Emma's voice carried on the spring breeze, clear and certain. "Grandpa." Travis looked around the park, as if sensing I might be nearby. For a moment, our eyes almost met across the distance. Then he turned back to Emma and said something that made her smile. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket, the one I'd been carrying for weeks. Inside was Emma's original drawing, professionally framed, along with a note I'd written in careful script. "When you're older, I'll be here. Until then, know that Grandpa loves you more than all the stars in the sky. Your future is safe, no matter what happens to the grown-ups." I approached the social worker's car, which was parked near the playground. She was loading files into her briefcase when I appeared. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you working with the Blake family?" She looked up, professional, but cautious. "I am." "And you are?" "Emma's grandfather, Raymond Blake." I handed her the envelope. "Could you make sure she gets this? It's important that she knows someone is looking out for her future." The social worker studied me for a moment, then glanced back toward the picnic table where my family sat. "You're the trust fund grandfather." "That's one way to put it." She took the envelope. "I'll make sure she gets it." "Thank you." I started to walk away, then turned back. "How is she doing?" "Better than her parents," the social worker said honestly. "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. She knows she's loved, and that's what matters most." I walked away without looking back, disappearing into the golden afternoon light that filtered through the park's oak trees. Behind me, I could hear Emma's laughter mixing with the sound of other children playing, oblivious to the adult complications that had shattered and rebuilt their world. 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded through Paul Mahoney's office. The return address was a cheap apartment complex across town. Inside was a single piece of paper, Emma's school photo from Riverside Elementary, with a note written in Travis's handwriting. "She asks about you every day. When she's older, maybe we can explain. Thank you for protecting her when we couldn't protect ourselves." I put the photo on my refrigerator, next to the grocery list and utility bills that made up my new, simpler life. Emma was smiling in the picture, wearing a yellow dress that matched her crayon sunflowers. They thought I was disposable when comfort was abundant. But I'd learned something in the silence. People who betray others for convenience will suffer when that convenience disappears. And sometimes, the only way to save what you love is to let everything else fall.